Thanks for being with us on this Tuesday morning. It has been for quite a while the worst kept secret in D.C., but no longer. It is official. President Biden announced on social media just a few hours ago he will indeed run for re-election in 2024. His Vice President, Kamala Harris, by his side yet again.
Yeah, and so he made the announcement on Twitter this morning saying, quote, "Every generation has a moment where they have had to stand up for democracy, to stand up for their fundamental freedoms. I believe this is ours. That's why I'm running for re-election as President of the United States. Join us. Let's finish the job."
And he'll have the same running mate, Vice President Harris, making the announcement on social media saying the two will run as a team again. Harris became the first woman, of course, and woman of color to hold the vice presidency position. 2 months ago, New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg raised the eyebrows of Republicans and Democrats alike when she wrote what many had whispered for months. The headline read, "Biden's a great president who shouldn't run again." And Goldberg went on to state the case that the president should not seek office because of his age.
Well, that column raised the issue of what political talk show host Bill Maher calls the last accepted prejudice in America: ageism. Here to discuss ageism and the impact it could have on the 2024 presidential election is Kristal, Democratic strategist, also Shevaun Neupert, psychology professor at North Carolina State University, who looks at the effect of election stress on a person's health. What election stress? And Norman Solomon, co-founder of the online activist group RootsAction.org, which pushes people active in politics to be an independent political force. Many thanks to all of you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Norman, let's start with you here, because in 2020, your group ran a Vote Trump Out campaign in swing states, and this year you have a campaign saying, "Joe, don't run." Let's take a listen first, and I want to get your thoughts on the other side.
The threat of the GOP has become all too obvious. The stakes could not be higher.
Our ideas are way more popular than Joe Biden is.
Joe Biden running undermines the Democratic Party's chances in 2024.
We can't afford to lose. Don't run, Joe.
Don't run, Joe.
Don't run, Joe.
Don't run, Joe.
So why is your group against President Biden running again?
We want to defeat Republicans. We think it's a terrible threat to democracy. The specter of a Republican president taking office in January 2025, whether it's Trump or DeSantis or someone else from this party that has become so extreme, the Republican Party. So the objections are very strong on two counts. One is that it's clear from the polling that President Biden is a very weak candidate to run next year for president. And the other problem is that he has failed to mobilize a grassroots movement to support genuine progressive change. And those 2 points are really related because middle-class people are telling pollsters that they do not believe Biden has improved their economic and social situation. And if we did have a candidate, and if we do manage to get a Democratic nominee next year who really galvanizes a progressive populist base, including young people who Biden has alienated on his climate and fossil fuel decisions lately, if we can galvanize that support, we're going to be able to do two things that are crucial. One is to defeat Republicans, and the other is to improve the future of working class people in this country.
Who is that, in your opinion?
Well, they don't have any space right now to emerge unless we can, even now, persuade Biden to not pursue his plans to run for re-election. There are a lot of people who are available, who have experience, who have done a lot of good work in Washington. We saw in 2020 that you can have a lively primary. There were so many candidates, you couldn't even have them all on one stage in one night. There had to be 2 nights of debates. It's not a negative thing to have a contested primary. That's what we need.
So, Kristal, do you think that that still could happen? A poll from the AP Center for Public Affairs Research shows only 26% of Americans even want to see Biden run again. That's up from 22% only in January. You know, he has announced now, so that's kind of irrelevant at this point. But could the support change, or do you think other people will come out of the woodwork?
I think the support will change in that there will be a likelihood of people, now that he's made this official announcement, who will increase their support for him and get behind him. What we know is that many Democrats across this country have always stated if the president intends to run for re-election, that they would stand behind him, and that means going out on the campaign trail, when he decides to travel the entire country, they will be right there by his side. You know, I do think that that poll is concerning, and I'm glad that we're discussing it because it is a real thing. But I think, you know, people don't know until someone presents themselves, they talk about what they want to run on, and I think we have to give the president an opportunity to show us as Americans what he wants to do differently in his next term moving forward. And I fully intend for him to be the nominee. I don't think that we will have an open primary. I don't even think that we'll have any debates because most of the folks in the Democratic Party will fall in line behind him.
Well, Shevaun, you have an expertise in election stress, which makes you an apt guest for where we are right now. I'm just wondering, obviously Biden's age is a factor in all of this, and some people consider that to be ageist. Others are just realistic. 80 years old is old, and now you have the most stressful job on the planet. To me, stress would be if something were to happen to President Biden at some point during this journey that he officially launched today, and then we are scrambling, or that the Democratic Party is then scrambling to have a replacement candidate, or if he's president and Vice President Vice President Harris has to take over. That to me is stressful. People worry about the age because that's an extension of their concern about continuity. And because it's a trauma for this country if the president gets sick or dies while in office. That is stressful for the nation. Talk a little bit about that in the context of this age discussion.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that our societal expectations or stereotypes about aging tend to exaggerate the negative aspects of aging, but underestimate the positive aspects of aging. So we know that as people get older, there's a tendency to improve in things called crystallized intelligence, that our ability to acquire knowledge and new skills continues to improve throughout the lifespan. So that involves things like vocabulary, taking in new information. These are really important resources that older adults draw upon to combat what might be some negative aging-related experiences. So there's a lot of strengths that come with aging, and I feel like sometimes our messaging tends to miss those positive aspects of aging.
To follow up on that, is there an appropriate way to have this discussion around age? Because it is going to be an issue that dominates this upcoming race.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the more people that are involved in the conversation, the better. One of the best ways to combat isms, so if we're talking about ageism, is to bring people of diverse ages together. So having generations talk to each other, have some intergenerational conversations. I think that would be one really strong avenue to pursue, and the ways in which we can facilitate a conversation across generations. Another idea to think about is having ways in which people understand that there is tremendous heterogeneity in aging. It is the most diverse phase of the lifespan. There's a great phrase, if you've met one 80-year-old, you've met one 80-year-old. So the idea is that we really need to evaluate each person on their own in terms of what their qualifications would be, what their strengths would be, what their potential limitations would be.
And can you just talk very quickly also on the factor of just being in such a stressful situation of being the president and how it has affected Biden's health in general, or how it really affects anyone's health? This has been a particularly tumultuous time, and whoever the nominee for the Republicans ends up, if it is former President Trump, how does that factor in him as well? Because he is also one of the older candidates possible.
Yes, that's true. So stress, when it is intense for long periods of time, can have negative health consequences, but some of the best ways to combat those potential negative implications of stress is exercise. And so when we see people being physically active and really engaging in exercise, physical activity, strength training, these are some of the best things that people can do to combat stress at any age, particularly older adults.
Kristal, the National Democratic Party has said that it will support President Biden's re-election and that there will not be any primary debates. You alluded to that a second ago. There are two other candidates who are running. But by and large, really, the party will coalesce around, I assume, President Biden, because they do around the incumbent. These are the other two people who are challenging him, neither of whom are being taken seriously in terms of actually having a shot. Not to discount them, but again, let's just keep the conversation real here. It is hard to beat an incumbent, and nobody wants to publicly embarrass the president from their own party by not publicly supporting him. So, you know, this is an easy ride to the nomination for Biden. How do you think it plays, though, in the general? Because for most Democrats, what they fundamentally care about is Donald Trump not getting back to the White House, not so much about the Biden agenda.
Yeah, that's such a great point that you made at the bottom of your commentary. Really, Joe Biden is the only candidate that can beat Donald Trump. We saw that happen in real time. And so that's what we're banking on and anticipating again. We need a strong male candidate to run against a Donald Trump, who's also a male candidate. And based upon what the country has been through under the presidency of Trump and where the country has gone under the presidency of Joe Biden, I feel confident that he is our best candidate. He is our best person. Now, all things considered, if there were another candidate to arise who Democrats felt strong about, the question is the long game. Can this person win in the general election? Of course, there are plenty of people who probably have great ideas and would be great leaders for this country. But ultimately, we're talking about a dogfight with Donald Trump. We're talking about someone that we're going to have to pull out every single rank and file thing to fight against his strong base in this country. And so when we think about his base, considering all the things he's embroiled in as far as scandals and legal trouble, he is still a candidate that we have to work hard to beat. And that is the only candidate that can do that is Joe Biden.
And Norman, there's a very real possibility that it will be President Biden versus former President Trump in the general election. How do you see that shaking out? What are the next 12 months going to look like?
Well, there's no reason to believe that Biden can necessarily defeat Trump whatsoever. We should keep in mind that Trump was the incumbent defending the status quo last time. Next year, it will be Joe Biden defending the status quo, and he will have to defend the status quo at a time when every poll is showing that the wrong track rating, that is, the discontent levels, are at a more than 3-decade high. NBC News says this is unprecedented. The discontent in this country is widespread, it is deep, it is high, and yet we're being told this sort of fairy tale that somehow Biden is the one to defeat Trump. I think the evidence is quite to the contrary. It's not to put down Biden for what he has done, which is good. It's to say that he has done a lot of things that have alienated the young, that have not been able to really galvanize support of the type that we really need next year.
Kristal, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I've heard him say twice that Joe Biden has alienated young folks. And when we talk about student loan forgiveness, when we talk about his ability to stand up for women across this country, in states like Kansas and Michigan have fought back against the federal, protections, or the federal protections that, Roe versus Wade took away from them, that is absolutely the wrong narrative. I'm not going to call it a false narrative, but it is the wrong narrative. Young people are galvanized and excited about a president who talks about student loan forgiveness, a president who talks about paid family leave in their respective states, a president who talks about fighting for the protections of women, president who talks about making sure that mifepristone is still available for women to take across this country. And so when we talk about young people, we have to put it in context around policy. What specifically are young folks, upset about, allegedly? My counter is all the things that I just listed that I think the young base in this country should be excited about.
Well, it should be excited, but if I may, if you look at the polls, that is completely false. The polls have a stunning figure of last summer, 90% of young voters did not want Biden to run again. So we can say what they should think, but what's important is what they really think.
But those young people, do you believe, are going to run out and vote for Trump if he's the nominee?
No, they'll stay home.
Absolutely.
They'll stay home or they'll vote third party. We can't afford to have young voters who will vote overwhelmingly for a Democrat if they vote. We can't afford to have them stay home. We can't afford to have them be alienated, as in these fossil fuel decisions about their future with the climate that have been so damaging for our futures in the last few weeks coming out of the White House.
Shevaun, back to you. What's always fascinating to me about American politics is the pendulum it swings on, right? You're going from Bush to Obama, Obama to Trump, Trump to Biden, and it certainly goes back even further than that. What is it in terms of our political psychology in this country that we always kind of like to go a little bit different than what we've known? And does that dynamic in any way shape a potential rematch between these two? Because essentially now it's two older men who both have been president going at it again. So there's not an excitement factor at all to this race. There's a kind of a slogging sense of familiarity to it. But how do you think that plays out in terms of America always kind of switching its mind every 4 or 8 years in terms of what we want in a leader?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think Kristal's point about the fact that the issues change is something that people really respond to. So what might be the most pressing or relevant issues for each person as they consider how they're going to vote each time is something that contributes to that pendulum shift. So as people are focusing on what they believe is the most important issue, they will resonate with the candidate that they believe will be able to address their most pressing concern in the best way. So the way in which I tend to think about each election process is that it does play out over long periods of time. So your viewers now are thinking about an election. We're talking about an election that will happen more than 1 year from now. And so this process of anticipating and imagining a plan for what they will be doing and how they will engage with this information has, of course, important implications for the country and the outcome of that election. But on an individual basis, and thinking from psychological principles, it has an important implication for how people live their daily lives each and every day up until that day of the election. So as people experience stress related to the election, even though it hasn't yet happened, that has implications for their physical health on a daily basis. It has implications for their emotional health on a daily basis. So trying to encourage people to find ways to continue to engage in the political process even when it is stressful for them, is an important message.
Such a fascinating discussion.
And Renee, real quick, Norman, just in 10 seconds, do you support a third party nominee jumping into this thing, which Democrats fear would hurt Biden?
Absolutely
10
not.
seconds.
We're going to have to support the Democratic nominee to defeat Republicans. That's the crucial reality.
All right.
All right, Democratic strategist Kristal Knight, RootsAction.org, Norman Solomon, and psychology professor Shevaun Neupert. Thank you all so much for joining us here to have this discussion. Really appreciate you taking the time to come join us today. Have a great rest of your day.